Assalamu alaikum, Brother Uthman.
Walaikum assalam. 1 second.
Brother, maybe you can tell participants to put their institution's name in bracket or against their names. That way we.
Brother, let's not complicate it. It's not possible as yet. This is something that is to be managed by the individuals.
No, we can tell the participants to just rename themselves and put their names of the institutions against their names. So that means.
Brother, there are 300 people. We can put it maybe in the chat window. We can put it this, but asking them to do it at the may be complicated. But anyway, I can mention this.
Oh yeah, please.
I'll start the webinar now. Testing 1, 2, 3. Sorry. Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Brother Umar, should we start?
Yes, Brother Rizwan, I think we should start.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and a very good day to all of you joining us from different parts of the world. On behalf of AAOIFI and its partners for this event, Bahrain Association of Banks, UAE Banks Federation, and Arab Monetary Fund, we welcome you to this very important public hearing event on the development and governance of Sharia compliant benchmark rates. Indeed, it is the first public hearing on this standard that we are developing. However, we had a number of roundtables prior to this session today, but that was earlier in the standards development phase. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, historically, Islamic finance transactions have been priced using the conventional benchmark rates. And this topic has been debated time and again within the industry for as long as I can remember. Although the use of conventional interest rate benchmarks is not haram, however, it does raise eyebrows of stakeholders. And as such, indeed, it's not a preferred option for us to continue using. And it's not an ideal for us to continue using this benchmark rate. The AAOIFI Governance and Ethics Board, in line with AAOIFI Shari'ah Board, believes that the Islamic financial transaction should be priced in line with the real economy, and they should be de-linked from the conventional interest rate benchmarks. It should be based on a benchmark that reflects the true economic reality of the transaction. This will indeed enhance the level of confidence within the industry. The recent discontinuation of the conventional benchmark standard in the form of LIBOR and the transition to risk-free rates has offered us an opportunity to transition the industry to this alternative benchmark rates based on real economic factors. The standard that we are developing and is being presented today is an effort towards this objective by providing the solutions which is based on which provide us core principles based guidance in respect to the development and governance of Sharia compliant benchmark rates. The standard addresses core principles in respect of establishing criteria for selection, computation, governing, and administering, publishing and applying benchmark rates for Islamic transactions and structures in a transparent manner. We believe through this model, through this standard, we will be able to present some illustrative models for Sharia compliant benchmark rates. This is not a topic of discussion as we speak, as the models are currently being developed. What is being presented today are the principles for administering and publishing of such benchmarks. We believe it's a very important standard that we are developing, and I think it gives us an opportunity today to deliberate and discuss this with yourselves. We have about 350 people registered for this event today. As I said, this is the first public hearing on this topic. We are going to have a number of other public hearings on this. In at least we will have another 3 or 4 public hearings, and of which one will be in Arabic. The idea of this public hearing is to receive your feedback and comments on the document that has been developed, so that you can share your feedback and comments on it. In case of any errors that exist, in case you think there are certain areas that have not been covered properly, or maybe perhaps there's an area that we have missed out. So this is an opportunity for us to learn from your experience and from your experience and knowledge on the topic. Of course, the standard has been developed with the help of a large number of stakeholders from different parts of the world, from different organizations, and have been by the subject matter experts. So today we have this opportunity to hear from you. We hope that this session will be an interactive session. The schedule of the program is such that we will have, we broke it down into 2 sessions. The session 1 will be from now till 12 o'clock, and then we'll break for 15 minutes for prayers break. At least in Bahrain, it will be Dhuhr prayer. And then we'll continue the second part of the session, which will be from 12:15 to 1 p.m. We hope the sessions will be interactive. We want to learn from your experiences. Our request would be to put any questions and suggestions that you may have in the chat window, in the Q&A tab, and not in the chat window. The chat window may be disabled for most of the people. I think please place all your questions in the Q&A tab. If you have not been able to access this exposure draft as yet, we will share the link once again with you through the chat window. Of course, the session is being recorded, and it is based on the request that we have received from our stakeholders. We have decided at AAOIFI to make all such public hearings available on YouTube. So all the previous recordings that have been conducted for our public hearing will also be made available on YouTube, AAOIFI YouTube channel. And today's session is the first one that is going live on YouTube as we speak. So it will remain there for your reference later on as well. However, if you have any questions and suggestions for AAOIFI for this standard or for other matters, please reach out to us. For this standard, you can send an email to governance@aaoifi.com. For all other matters, please reach out to us on info@aaoifi.com. We'll be more than happy to explore areas of collaboration and see how we can work together for us to continue developing the industry together. So with that, without any further ado, let me hand it over to the Secretary General of AAOIFI, who will be taking you through the governance standard that we have developed, and inshallah will conduct the session with us. I would also like to take this opportunity on behalf of AAOIFI to wish you all a very happy Ramadan. And inshallah, we hope that we'll be able to benefit from this opportunity that we have received once again this year, inshallah. So with that, I pass it on to Brother Umar Mustafa Ansari, the Secretary General of AAOIFI, to present the standard and provide more update on it, inshallah.
Thank you, Brother Dr. Rizwan. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And we wish you the best of the blessings of the holy month that is starting tonight, inshallah, in most parts of the world. We would like to thank all of you for being here, for registering with us, for being here, for providing your valuable input. And we hope that, inshallah, this session will be great in terms of discussions and interactions. I would like to additionally thanks in particular first the supporters for this event for today, Arab Monetary Fund, Bahrain Association of Banks, and UAE Banking Federation. In addition, I would like to thank the sponsors of the project itself, including CBB Waqf Fund and certain Islamic financial institutions, without whose support it would never be possible to come to this level where we have achieved. And what we want to do is actually way ahead of that. Brother Rizwan has already provided some background on the project. I would like to mention that we have started working on this project from all angles, which includes collaboration with other bodies. We worked on the accounting board, governance board, Sharia board level to identify different areas where we need to work on. Obviously, the major part of this project is related to the governance and ethics board of AAOIFI, but even the Sharia board has become part of this one by initiating some of the initiatives in this respect and actually supporting the idea. Actually, they nominated one of the Sharia board members officially as part of the member of the working group as well, so that they are updated about the progress on this project because of the significance of this project. I would like to mention that while Islamic finance can refer to conventional benchmarks and which may not be termed as haram, but as Brother Rizwan has already said, that this is one of the biggest contentions that have been raised, one of the biggest issues and challenges that have been faced by the Islamic finance industry globally. And obviously, there are times you become wiser with the age, you become more stable and more understanding of the things that can be done in when you reach a suitable level of maturity. From that perspective, again, we cannot say that Islamic finance and economics has reached the level of the maturity or attained the age of maturity that is needed to go for breaking the barriers, going out of the box, getting out of the ambit of the conventional banking regime. Still, it may not be possible in most parts of the world, but there are things which are encouraging. We can see markets where Islamic finance has grown to a significant level. We have seen some countries who have tried to keep all the banking system within Islamic, and there are some more who are trying to do something, at least doing an effort to do that. We believe that this initiative of AAOIFI at this juncture is very important, because this might be the time when people may think that, yes, okay, actually moving away from LIBOR is possible, or IBOR-based any benchmark rates which are country-specific, like SRIBOR, CIBOR, etc. And the concept that was there in the back of the mind for the people, oh, we cannot live without LIBOR or similar rates similar to LIBOR. That concept at least has been taken away even by the conventional world. They said, no, LIBOR had its own problems. Obviously, they considered those problems from the perspective of conventional finance, but we need to see to what extent those challenges that we were facing from Islamic finance perspective, how they can be overcome in these transition times. The problem that we felt was that the change was bringing even bigger problems for us. The risk-free rates that have been introduced are primarily backward-looking rates, which means their implementation mechanism actually requires you to readjust the rates on a post-facto basis. This is something which is again from the true spirit of Islamic finance may not be considered acceptable. For some of the transactions, yes, it may be considered acceptable subject to certain conditions. But to be honest, finding the real solution for this thing may not lie within the traditional Islamic banking regime. Rather, for some of the banks and some of the infrastructure bodies are trying to come up with solutions which, on one hand, provide the solution to this biggest challenge of applying these rates, but at the other hand, they raise more questions, more concerns of the puristic view of Islamic finance because of the mechanism that is applied. Before I take you to the standard, I would like to mention one thing. The Islamic finance is not about time value of money. It is about time value of economic resources. وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not allowed us to charge money on money. If you do not charge money on money, obviously we have put some of the details about this concept in the standard itself, and the base of conclusion also contains some. But the point is very important that we need to understand that considering the factor that you cannot charge money on money, that fundamentally makes the interest rate as zero. And if the interest rate and opportunity cost becomes zero on money, opportunity cost on money alone becomes zero, then it means that time value of money will always be equal to the base value. because the interest rate becomes zero. This is one thing that, again, we all have grown up, we all have lived, we all have got our educations in the conventional system. We all have the conventional mindset in our DNA. So the system teaches us that money always has an opportunity to regrow itself. But Islamic finance and economics doesn't think like that. Based on the basic prohibition and basic permission, that is وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا, means that you cannot make money on money. Money does not have the right to give, to lay eggs every day. Money does not have the right to regenerate itself. And obviously, we all understand that this money on money system has created so many evils in the today's capitalist world. But we need to understand that the solution that Islamic finance provides is that money alone cannot be a factor of production. Money is a means of exchange, and it can be used as a storage of value. But money has to be combined with the economic resources to generate returns, which means that money has to be converted into assets, or has to be applied into services, or has to be combined with entrepreneurship, or has to be put in any other productive form where it generates returns to the society. And in this actually is the situation where the link between the economic reality and the financial system is created. Using the conventional benchmark rates might not be haram, but they actually create a sort of linkage between the economic activity with the financial system in a way that the financial system drives the economic activity, not the other way around. And what happens that the benchmark rates are based on the money supply and demand, and are not based on the economic values and not based on the economic activity. This is something which is fundamentally against the concepts of Islamic finance. Again, our argument here is not that we just want to change the name of a conventional rate to come up with an Islamic rate. No, we need to go to the basics. We need to go to the core concepts from where Islamic finance is coming up. And from those core concepts, we need to understand what is the reality. Now, some of the things you can say, Umar, you are still thinking something premature, but our governance and ethics board, alhamdulillah, doesn't think that way. They believe that we need to do what is needed. And we believe that there are grounds, even in the current world, where Islamic banking has become significant, even under IMF criteria of 15% of banking assets, there are nearly 16, 17 countries meeting that criteria. There are countries who have crossed 25% or 30%. There are 1 or 2 countries crossing 50%. There are several countries and regions that have either fully adopted Islamic finance or have decided to convert fully to Islamic finance. We have Sudan, although now recently it is allowed to have conventional banking, but it's still 100% banking Islamic. We have Libya that has vowed to convert completely to Islamic finance. We have Afghanistan that is in the process of full conversion, and the government is clear that, and the central bank is clear that 100% banking has to be on Islamic basis. We have region of Somaliland where it is clear decision by the central bank that we have to have only Islamic finance. We do not want to have any conventional finance. In Pakistan, there is a judgment by the Federal Shari'ah Court. In Pakistan, there has been long discussions on this issue at the judiciary level, but now it is concluded again, and the government has also said that we'll try to convert. So these are the examples that are encouraging to see that maybe what is needed to be done on this benchmark rate front, maybe this is the right time. That on one hand, even the conventional banking and finance are moving, and or rather have moved in between from the old-fashioned IBOR to the new RFRs, risk-free rates, which actually itself provides an opportunity for Islamic finance to think about a real transition. And on the other hand, we can find the Islamic banking growing significantly bigger and in a lot of countries. And additionally, we may have some of the jurisdictions that want to be working only on Islamic basis, and this is something where we need to test the waters. What we have done in this project and what we are going to do first, this is the first exposure draft in this sequence, which actually covers the core principles. We started working on multiple fronts. We held multiple roundtables, a lot of working group meetings. Our consultant did a great job in analyzing the available proposed models. We evaluated some of the models that have been proposed or that have been tried in some in some form. Like, for example, Thomson Reuters, that's Refinitiv, they had in past tried IBOR, Islamic interbank rate, and we have models proposed by different experts from around the globe. The most important of the two models that we are considering right now include the model presented by IRTI, that is Islamic Development Bank Institute, and some of the experts from ISRA, Dr. Aznan Hassan and Dr. Anwar Osman and others who are kindly member of our working group as well. So first thing is that we started identifying what are the issues and what are the challenges and what sort of proposed models are available. And we started considering these models and we started evaluating these models to the extent that they were available. And from that perspective, we identified that there are different models, but some of the core concepts are the same. However, how to evaluate those models and how to determine which model is the best for Islamic finance, from that perspective, we had to see additional angles. And from those angles, we evaluated certain additional aspects which are there available in the literature with regard to other possible proposed models, including some of the conventional concepts about benchmark rates and discount rates determination, etc. And from that perspective, I can just mention one quote of one of the most senior experts in Islamic economics. He said, even the way the governments determine the discount rate is not repugnant to Sharia. Again, I do not want to go into that argument, but the point was that if you base your benchmark rates on the economic realities, then most probably you are complying with Sharia, and those rates can be used as Sharia compliant benchmark rates. So from this perspective, we evaluated some of the possible models and the initial research report, but we identified that the best way of moving forward would be to develop the core principles first. That what are the core principles or based on which you can say that this model is Sharia compliant and this model is not Sharia compliant. This benchmark rate is Sharia compliant and this benchmark rate is not Sharia compliant. If I am saying right now that, I just want to clarify this, that if I'm saying that this benchmark rate is not Sharia compliant, does not mean that the transactions that refer to that rate are not Sharia compliant. The only thing is that the transactions that are referring to that benchmark rate should be Sharia compliant in their essence and should not be impacted by those rates in a manner that their execution is affected and execution is not in line with Sharia compliance. For example, the challenges that we are having in case of RFRs. So otherwise, when we say Sharia compliant benchmark rate, we are talking about the system where we need to take the things. And as I mentioned, that I do not want to take you on that debate that why the benchmark rates based on money supply are not good for economic development as compared to the benchmark rates that are based on the economic realities, and why those rates which are based on the financial markets should not be the primary rates for Islamic finance. Because again, I do not want to go in all those debates, but I would like to mention that the Islamic finance transaction structures have their own intrinsic risks and risk profiles. So from those perspectives, you need to determine which rates are more suitable for those transactions that actually take care of those aspects. Obviously, as I mentioned, it should not be purely the money and demand and supply. Rather, it should be primarily based on the economic activity level and the economic returns that those assets are generating or can generate. Obviously, debate can go, this discussion can go long. I have talked a lot about this initial part. So I would like to take you through the standard now with just one final clarification. This standard will be accompanied with two more products. First will be selected models. We are evaluating the selected models, and after evaluating them more further, we have done some qualitative testing for those. And after doing that, completing that qualitative testing and coming to the quantitative testing and some data analysis based on those benchmark rates, we will be coming up probably with one or more software based engines as well. For doing that, those analysis, we are thinking of making eventually those engines available to some of the regulators. We have started talking to some of the regulators to work with us with regard to establishing these benchmark rates and doing their testing. Inshallah, we are hopeful that some of the regulators will be working with us who also are facing the similar challenges with regard to the benchmark rates, particularly those regulators who are operating in countries where by the political will it is decided that the whole banking system has to be Islamic. So from that perspective, this standard will result in certain models which actually comply with this standard. That is, certain models which are acceptable within the core principles contained in this model. So that is the second output that we will be having, and probably that will be the most important ideal. Just to clarify, this standard does not bind and is not intending to bind to a single model. The idea is that any benchmark model that can comply with these core principles will be considered Sharia compliant, and that can be based on the suitability to the regulators, on the suitability to the financial system, on the suitability to the governments, with regard to the availability of data, with regard to the economic activities, with regard to the priorities, economic priorities of the government. So from considering all those aspects, there can be different models. Even one country, one regulator can adopt more than one model for different type of transactions, or they can allow, again, there are challenges with that. Some of those will be addressed within the discussion that we are having. Another output of this project will be a governance standard that once the benchmark rates are determined, some of the governance aspects are covered in the core principles, but we will be probably coming up either with a standard or with the governance or with the standard additionally on the governance of the institution that actually determines the benchmark rate and the whole process of governance overseeing the determination of these benchmark rates. So that will be the third output. The third output will be similar to some of the standards and documents that are globally available already by some regulators and by some international bodies. So that a lot of concepts will remain same with regard to the data security, with regard to the independence, avoidance of conflict of interest, the process controls, etc. So that is something on which we may decide to come up with guidelines instead of coming up with full standard, because some of the global standards might be fulfilling the requirements that we are having, except for the Sharia compliance part. So that part we have not yet decided. So the first document that is in front of you is the core principles for benchmark rates for Islamic finance, which means that any benchmark rate which is based on these core principles will be considered suitable and Sharia compliant. Obviously, we have two conditions, main conditions I'll take you through. That first is suitability and second is Sharia compliance. I'm sorry I have taken a lot of time, but this is a completely different subject. And I think that this sort of discussion was very much important before we actually go to the standard and and read it. So with that, do we have any questions right now? I think there are some comments on the chat window, but there is no question and answer in the Q&A tab. If we have any general questions about the project, I'll be more than happy to respond to them right now. Do we have first thing, as Brother Rizwan has mentioned, that we'll answer all the questions, inshallah, that are received in the Q&A tab. However, if the time permits, we'll try to allow some of the participants to speak as well. Okay, so then as we do not have anything in Q&A tab, so now I will take you through the standard itself. I believe my screen is legible to all of you. You all can see it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, brother, for confirmation. So this is the development and governance of Sharia compliant benchmark rates. As I mentioned, it contains the core principles. It will towards the next phase of the project. I'm sorry. Towards the next phase of the project, inshallah, we will be adding the models to the same standard as its appendix or as guidelines additionally. This is not yet final as to whether those will be separate guidelines or appendix. We think, and we have initially planned, that the selected models will be part of the same standard towards finalization. What we want from all of you now, for sure, we want to take comments that we receive now, but we want to request two additional things. Number one, there are a lot of regulators, mashallah, attending today. We have registrations of more than 300, out of which I think 25 or 27 regulators and banking associations are there. We are willing to work with all of you, whoever feel interested in the topic and whoever feels that they need a Sharia compliant benchmark rate in their jurisdiction. So from that perspective, we offer you all a collaboration possibility to work together for developing these benchmarks. The main thing that will be needed from the regulators and the banking associations, etc., will be access to the data in the respective countries. And obviously, one country may not have data for all type of possible models, but what is more suitable, what data is more available, that needs to be tried and tested for the suitability of the quantitative criteria of this model of benchmarks. Having said that, the second thing that we need from you is we can see a lot of more senior experts and scholars and certain economists are there. So we would like to request them all to suggest any possible proposed model that they have developed or they have identified, even from the conventional side. If they feel that there is a model that can be suitable and meeting the criteria that we are talking about, they can forward it to us. We have several models being evaluated right now, but one of the important purposes of publishing these core principles in advance was to invite more possible models so that we can evaluate those models. It is quite possible that some of those models may have some characteristics which can be combined together to come up with a more suitable model. So from that perspective, we, number one, invite the regulators to collaborate with us. Number two, we invite the experts and economists to propose any possible models that, in their view, are compliant with the core principles contained in this standard. This will help us in determining the more suitable models, evaluating the more suitable models, and testing the more suitable models. What they say, that the taste of the pudding is in its eating. So we do not want it to be just any standard put in the shelves. We want it to be live. We want it to be available to the markets. We want it to be actually tried and tested, for which we need your support. Our team will be contacting most of the regulators who are attending here today. We can see actually that that some of them might be interested because they have significant Islamic finance sectors, or they have the priority of having only Islamic finance in their jurisdictions. So from that perspective, inshallah, we will be approaching most of these regulators ourselves as well. But we invite here that if you feel you are interested, please feel free to contact us on that. And surely we will be holding additional roundtables when we identify and evaluate the models. And so at that stage, we'll be inviting you again. I think there is a hand raised. I think, can you kindly put the questions, because towards the end of the discussion, I can see the hand raised by one of the participants. I think it was showing hand raised, but I think it's no more there. But the request is that at least in the initial phase, if you can put the questions in the Q&A tab, it will be great. Thank you. So let me take you to the standard now. Now, whatever is in the preface and whatever is in the introduction, most of it is already discussed. So I'll be skipping these slides unless somebody has any comment. Like our earlier standards, public hearing, those of you who are familiar with our standards public hearings, this presentation that we make is not a separate presentation. It's only the standard itself, which is made available to the made available in a form of a PowerPoint presentation. So it is not shared with the participants. We share the PDF copy of the standard with the participants. You can refer to that if you need access to the document. The link is provided already by the team in the chat window, I believe. The objective of this standard is to provide principle-based guidance. Sister Alia, can you just check? Is missing here, which might be in the PowerPoint only, I believe, but just make a note of it. The objective of the standard is to provide principle-based guidance in respect of the development and governance of Sharia-compliant benchmark rates, including principles for establishing criteria for selection, computation, governing, and administering, publishing, and applying benchmark rates for Islamic finance transactions and structures in a transparent manner. I think we can have a Brother Munshi Muhammad Ashfaqul Alam, CSA, how can I contact you to become a working group member for this purpose? Brother, you can just write an email to governance@aoifi.com, and we'll inshallah see if the working group has more like vacancies available. We will try. I'm not committing to you right now, but inshallah we will try. But for sure, we will be inviting you, Sister Alia. Please make the note. We will be inviting you in all the upcoming open forums for working group. Yes, we will be willing to take you. We need to check the permission of the chairman, and we need to see if the working group has some space available. It's already a very large working group, so I'm not committing right now. But you are welcome. Just send an email with your profile, and inshallah we will consider. Thank you very much. I hope that we will still be able to get benefit from your input in form of comprehensive comments on the standard. Thank you very much, sir. The scope. This standard shall apply to any benchmark rates proclaimed to be complying with Sharia principles and rules in respect of its development and governance, including principles for establishing criteria for selection, computation, governing and administration, publishing and applying such benchmark rates to Islamic finance transactions and structures. Definitions. Some of the definitions I will read where I feel this is important. Administrator is an organization or legal person that actually administers the process of benchmark rate. We have put some responsibilities for the administrator. Benchmark rate. Now, this is the important definition. Benchmark rate is a rate of return normally denoted in percentage terms over a particular period, which can be used as anchor in pricing a financing transaction. Now, this is the conventional definition. Let's be clear. We have a definition of benchmark rate and we have a definition of Sharia compliant benchmark rate. So the benchmark rate definition is a conventional definition. So it even use a financing transaction. We are not insisting that it is always related to a Islamic finance. But when we talk about Sharia compliant benchmark rate in this standard, in the specific context of this standard is a benchmark rate established in line with the requirements of this standard. So the standard has defined the criteria by applying which you can ensure that a benchmark rate is Islamic. So the benchmark rate definition is similar to conventional, but applying with the criteria of this standard makes it Sharia compliant benchmark rate. Now, we first is part A, application of benchmark rates in Islamic finance transactions and structures. Preferred treatment. The pricing for Islamic finance and transactions and structures shall reflect true economic value of the transactions of exchange of economic resources, for example, in trade, lease, and other Sharia compliant modes of financing, as well as the market dynamics, including demand and supply situations. Such pricing shall be based on the Sharia compliant benchmark rates established in line with the requirements of this standard. On the contrary, a direct reference to the conventional benchmark rates which are not compliant with Sharia principles and rules shall be avoided. So we are saying that this is the preferred treatment and the Sharia compliant benchmark rate should be the basis for Islamic finance transactions and structures, and a conventional benchmark rate should be avoided. Treatments allowed as a consequence of necessity. In cases where the preferable treatment of benchmark rate selection in line with the requirements of paragraph 4, as we discussed above, cannot be maintained due to reasons including inter alia, the counterparty refusal, laws or regulation of the respective jurisdiction, data unavailability over shorter horizons, etc., conventional benchmark rates may be applied to Islamic finance transactions and structures in line with and to the extent of permissibility and the manner of application as defined in relevant AAOIFI Sharia standards. One very important thing that I forgot to mention, that normally most of the AAOIFI standards, the technical standards, governance, auditing, ethics, accounting, when we issue those standards, they are subject to review by Sharia committee. Normally, the reviews are conducted towards the end of the project. But because of the significance of this project, we actually conducted a review of the core principles even before finalizing of this exposure draft. So these core principles that we are referring to here are actually approved by the Sharia committee of the AAOIFI Sharia board already, which means that we are talking about not only the AAOIFI governance board's views on this or the working group's views on this, but also the views of the Sharia committee on that part. So again, we are not saying that use of conventional benchmark rates is haram. They are allowed because of need, but that have to be applied strictly in compliance with and according to the manner as defined in relevant AAOIFI Sharia standards. So for example, for musharka, for mudarba, for wakala, for murabha, for ijara, any type of Islamic finance transaction, the respective standards have put in some conditions as to how and to what extent benchmark rates can be referred to, and how and to what extent those rates can be variable over the period of time. So those are the conditions, like for murabha, once you fix the price, you cannot change it. So this is a condition is AAOIFI Sharia board. So you cannot apply a post facto sort of rate adjustment on that. There are issues on that. Again, I would like to mention that the AAOIFI Sharia board, when we were in the beginning of the project and Sharia board was evaluating these issues, the Sharia board actually issued a letter to the regulators around the globe. And we wrote and in that letter, we actually requested the regulators to keep an eye on the change of the benchmark rates, because there are Sharia concerns on that. And the Sharia board did not endorse the application of risk-free rates as of now. We are working additionally with AAOIFI and IFSB also in this area. We are thankful to them for being part of the working group for this purpose. And we hope that the infrastructure bodies, all the infrastructure bodies, have to play their respective role in that. IFM has come up with some of the possible solutions. AAOIFI Sharia board has yet to evaluate and respond on that. But the main view of AAOIFI Sharia board is that the RFRs as of now in their absolute methodology may not be Sharia compliant, but there can be Sharia compliant solutions. And as I mentioned, some of those solutions may remain questionable from the Sharia perspective. So coming to this very important clause, here we are talking about what is happening today in the Islamic finance market. And obviously, AAOIFI Sharia standard, there is a AAOIFI Sharia standard on indices, and there are AAOIFI Sharia standards which are there is one on computation of profits, and there are Sharia standards related to the products. All of the issues related to where and how a benchmark rate can be applied and in what manner it can be applied, those are contained in the respective AAOIFI Sharia standards. Our purpose of this standard on the governance side is not to go into that area, and we just refer to the Sharia standards. Sheikh Hisham Masalhi has a comment. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and welcome, sir. It's always a pleasure to have senior people like you here. Salam, Brother Umar. In traditional jurisdictions, central banks that don't oblige their Islamic banks on whether favorable whatever favorable Islamic benchmark. At this case, can Islamic banks follow cost of their funds to benchmark their transactions? Sheikh, actually, this is a, to be honest, I cannot answer quickly on this thing, because if you ask about my view, the cost of the fund, technically Islamic finance does not have a cost of fund, because your most of the investment accounts, unless you start taking the deposit account based on tawarruk, which is not preferred by AAOIFI. AAOIFI does not prefer use of tawarruk for retail accounts. So other than that, if you keep your accounts based on mudarba, musharaka, or wakala, then saying that what is my cost of fund is technically incorrect, because there is no cost of fund. Actually, the rate of return on the assets generates the rate of return on the quasi equity. So from that perspective, sir, we cannot say that Islamic finance has cost of fund. We can say that we have displaced commercial risk. We have to compete with the conventional and other players. So we need to keep our rates that that's the rates that we give to our investment account holders close as possible to the market rates. That is correct, but that does not make it cost of fund. So from technical standpoint, AAOIFI does not believe that Islamic finance has cost of fund in most of the transactions. So from that perspective, applying the cost of fund model was not discussed in the possible models. There were some other possible models that were discussed, but not this cost of fund model. But we will be open to evaluate any model that comes to us, even if we can get a proposed model based on cost of fund. I personally don't believe it will be easy, but the only thing is possible that the past trends of the returns, I think one of the models may consider, because some of the proposals discuss that the past returns on investment account holders funds can be a basis for pricing. But the problem is that the rates have to be forward looking, because I cannot just the rate has to be based on the present and based on future expectations. You cannot put the rates based on the past trends only. Yes, past trend can provide a partial basis for it. This is one of the possible aspects within a model, but it cannot be the only basis for a model, sir. I was expecting much more questions, but I think more questions will be coming in due course, maybe it's becoming too much boring for all of you. So, but I think it is a very interesting topic. And I was afraid that even 3 hours may not be enough, but till now we have not received that much questions. So maybe today is a lucky day for me. Sheikh Muhammad Isa, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Welcome, sir. One of the major challenges in Islamic finance is the point of recognition of a transaction. How will the benchmark rate take care of this? Sir, this is a very important point, but at AAOIFI financial accounting standards, one of the biggest challenge that we have, and one of the reasons that we believe that Islamic finance cannot apply IFRS simply because the timing of recognition of the transaction, the timing of recognition of the asset, the liability, the revenue, the expense, they at times differ from Islamic to conventional. So I fully agree with you that this is one of the biggest challenges, and that is the reason that AAOIFI insists that the Islamic finance accounting standards are necessary. But this benchmark rate is not about, this standard is not addressing this issue. But this standard has one very important issue, that it talks about being forward-looking, means that we are doing a transaction for the future. And since we have to lock the price for the future, so the transaction pricing has to be futuristic. However, the benchmark rate is not about the timing of recognition of the transaction, but we will be honored to have more comments from you on this part if there is something that we are unable to fully understand from your comments, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, need and responsibility. Now we are starting here part B, that is development of Sharia compliant benchmark rate for Islamic finance transactions and structures. So first thing is need and responsibility. Need. A Sharia compliant benchmark rate or combination of such rates shall be used for pricing of Islamic finance transactions and structures insofar as possible by all IFIs in respect of all of their Sharia compliant products and services, and all other institutions, entities, governments, and central banks offering a Sharia compliant instrument or product, for example, sukuk, including like central bank discount window, etc. This responsibility and systemic importance. In every jurisdiction where Islamic finance achieves a level of systemic importance within the financial sector, or a combination of Sharia compliant benchmark rates shall be developed. A, preferably by an administrator appointed or authorized for such purpose by the respective regulator, or in the absence of the regulator's initiative in this regard, in line with the requirements of paragraph 7A, by an administrator collectively appointed by the Islamic finance industry with due approval of the regulator. So we are saying that whenever you reach the systemic importance, you should have a system of benchmark rates. Sharia compliant benchmark rates. The systemic importance for the purpose of the requirements of paragraph 8 shall be considered in this. Sister Alia, just check the paragraph number here. Make a note of it, please. Yeah, the systemic importance for the purpose of the requirements of paragraph above shall be considered in the specific perspective of a regulator's jurisdiction when any of the following conditions is met. A, Islamic banking's total assets comprise at least 15% of the total assets of the banking sector in the jurisdiction. In case of larger economies, such ratio shall be at least 10% of the total assets. It is presumed that, if you see the footnote, it is presumed that the larger economies mainly include the countries in G20 and D8 groups. The D20 of the group of 20 is an intergovernmental forum comprising 19 countries and the European Union. It is composed of most of the world's largest economies. The D8 or Developing 8 is an organization for developing cooperation among the following Muslim countries: Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, and Pakistan and Turkey. Out of which Turkey is part of G20 as well, I believe. Indonesia and Turkey. So we are talking about, and obviously if we see Saudi Saudi Arabia is also part of G20. So I think G20, I'm just mentioning that based on this criteria, Saudi Arabia, although Saudi Arabia will meet the 15% criteria as well, but Saudi Arabia, Indonesia and Turkey will be part of G20, being part of G20 are large economies, out of which Indonesia and Turkey don't reach the 15% criteria, but they are between 5 to 10%. Indonesia is reaching 10% and Turkey is a little bit less than 10%. But we believe that the Turkey's growth of Islamic finance in recent times is a bit better. So we hope that both of them will be reaching 10% shortly. Which include obviously for Bangladesh, Pakistan, the ratio is already above, Malaysia much above, Nigeria also has a good ratio, Iran is having 100%. So considering these things, we are talking about the larger economies. Again, AAOIFI's standards cannot be imposed on any of the regulator. Obviously, they have to adopt it for their own priority. But we believe that this is the more suitable criteria. And obviously, we welcome any comments, particularly from the regulators on these points. And again, this is not an AAOIFI's, any standard can never be imposing. It is always voluntary adopted. But obviously, even for voluntary adoption, you need to give sort of criteria where you feel that something becomes important. And we believe that where the systemic importance level is achieved, we need to have this standard adopted, and the benchmark rate should be available. If at least 15% of the market is having Islamic, or in 10% in larger economies, which is actually much bigger than the full banking size of some of other countries. So at least the sector is big enough that it needs a proper benchmark rate. I can see some questions coming, but let me complete the criteria first. Sukuk and other Sharia compliant sovereign securities comprising at least 10% of the total local government financing in the jurisdiction. So if the regulator or the central bank and the government, their sovereign securities comprise of at least 10% of sukuk or similar, they should also consider putting those sukuk and securities on Sharia compliant benchmark rates. If they are, again, variable rate. If they are fixed rate, then it's obviously there is no harm in that. But if they are variable rates, then they should also be basing them on the same criteria. Third, at least 50% of the banks in such jurisdiction in terms of numbers offer Islamic finance products and services, either being a full-fledged Islamic bank or through an Islamic finance window. So even if the size of the banking is not that big, but at least the majority of the banking sector is offering the Islamic finance products, either full-fledged plus windows. I can tell you that most of the countries where you see the C criteria will be meeting the A criteria also. But we kept these two criteria separately because here we are talking about the banking sector, at least 50% of the banking sector getting involved in Islamic finance. So from that perspective, we believe this is a suitable criteria. Now I can see some question answer in the question answer tab. There are some questions, so let me take. Sheikh Muhammad Isa, it seems that benchmark rate takes care of banking system. What about other sectors like capital market, while the benchmarking is also relevant, sir? Thank you very much, sir, for your kind comment. Now, if you can see, we mentioned, if you see the scope, let me take you back to the scope. So in the scope, we said, we did not mention about the banking only. We said, for benchmark rates to Islamic finance transactions and structures. We did not use the term Islamic banking anywhere, sir. And similarly, if you come here, then we talked about, we are talking about the sukuk also. Even if you come here in part A, we are talking about even sukuk here, if you see. So the point, what I want to say is, number one, we did not insist on banking. Number one, we said Islamic finance transactions and structures. Islamic finance transactions and structures include banking for sure, and they include sukuk. Other than sukuk, most of the capital market products will not be related to benchmark rates. They are direct equity investments or mutual fund investments, so they do not have a linkage with any benchmark rate. So from that perspective, I think that there is no need to make a specific reference to the capital markets. However, for sukuk, we have referred to, even in case of the government sukuk, we have mentioned in 6B, if you can see, that even for 6B, we have mentioned that even for the central banks and government sukuk, sovereign sukuk, they should be considering this benchmark rate if they are variable rate. So from that perspective, sir, I think capital markets are covered, well covered. We did not use the banking sector term. We used the term Islamic finance and structures, and we mentioned sukuk at some places very clearly. Other capital market products generally will not be related to benchmarks. Thank you very much, sir. I hope that this answer resolves your issue. From Tuğba Demirtaş, Central Bank of Turkey, for Turkey, 8.4% recently. Alhamdulillah, we are so happy to know that, because last 2-3 years, I think the growth has been phenomenal. But considering that Turkey has a big economy, from that perspective, reaching from 5 to 8.4 in a short span of time, it's very good growth. And I believe that the growth in Indonesia is also going very fast in a similar manner, after particularly the government level initiatives, including KNEKS and other initiatives, even the government level strategy that is there. So from that perspective, we believe that inshallah Turkey and Indonesia shortly will be within the 10% parameters, and being part of G20, both will be considered significant Islamic banking sector. Even as of now, Turkey's Islamic finance sector is bigger than a lot of other countries who might have in terms of percentage, a bigger amount, but a bigger percentage. But in terms of the size of the banking sector, Turkey is much bigger, I believe. So thank you very much for this update, and we are so happy to note that. Sheikh Isa again explain. Thank you very much, sir. I'm happy that I was able to answer. Sheikh Sayyid Musa Al-Habshi, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Welcome, sir. We are always, we're always encouraged to have senior people like you attending. Benchmark rates, validity, and disclosure are pertinent to guide fair and productive practices. Technically, it could be either longitudinal or cross-sectional index. Does its legality and legitimacy must relate to permissible assets only or market expectation as a whole? In a dual system, Islamic investors with less liquidity and solvency opportunity are in less favorable playing field. Does the standard consider or address this anomaly? Sir, excellent points that you have raised, and we fully agree with you. With regard to whether their legitimacy relate to permissible assets only, let me answer it very quickly. We'll go in detail for that part. There are two type of situations here. One is the financial market-based benchmark rate. I'll come to that. That has to be based only on Islamic and Sharia compliant assets and transactions. But with regard to the economic reality-based transactions, we are not putting this restriction, because we are seeing the economic growth and the economic opportunity cost, etc. at the broader level. So from that perspective, it is not there. I believe I'll be able to answer your other question with regard to liquidity and the solvency and the arbitrage issue later when we reach that place. Sinani Khalil, Bank of Algeria. For Algeria, the systemic importance is considered as the point C. More than 50% of the number of banks are offering Islamic finance products and services, but in terms of a point, the total asset is merely about 5%. So we think A and C aren't equivalent for our case, and what matters the most isn't the number of banks, especially for the launching Islamic finance experiences. Thank you very much. It's a very good comment. I would request Sister Alia to please, again, all of the comments that we receive are taken. So I would like to listen to you also. Now first thing is, why we kept A and C separately, because we thought that generally it will be the same, but in some cases it can be different. And that was the reason that we felt that if at least 50% of the banks are coming to Islamic finance business, it means that the systemic importance is there. When we talk about systemic importance, obviously, just let me, as a layman, I would say to you, if 50% of the banks are doing Islamic banking, then how we can say it's not systemically important, even because it's at times it may impact the whole of the banking industry. Anything bad that happens to that sector can impact the whole banking industry. So for me, yes, I agree that A and C in your case are not the same. We said that generally they will be the same, but the reason for keeping them separate was to identify if there is a situation like yours. We are it's thankful to you for identifying this situation. We would also like to listen to you if what I can feel that from your perspective, you don't feel that that you are having Islamic finance as systemically important because you are in the launching experience. That I can understand from your comment. Although 50% of the banks are doing. Now, this is a unique case. I'll consider, obviously, for sure, all these comments are taken to the, whatever comments we received are taken to the working group and to the board, but we will see how we need to address it, because it can be maybe it can be relaxed, or it can be considered that no, yes, it is better to keep both the conditions, because this condition also is considered systemically important. Again, from our perspective, IMF has the first criteria. We kept the first criteria, but then we added 10% criteria for the bigger markets. Then we added the 50% criteria for the Islamic banking. And the reason was that we considered that systemically importance is not coming only from one area. It is coming from not only in terms of a number, in terms of the size of the sector. One more thing I would like to say, maybe the systemically important thing that AAOIFI is considering might be different from the perspective of IMF and the perspective of the respective regulators in one aspect additionally. That aspect is that we believe that if there is a significant size of the sector offering products and services to common man, then the outreach of the banking sector is big enough, and the need for benchmark rates become important. On the other hand, if I see just from the perspective of the regulator or the IMF, for them, if the size is only 5%, they may feel that, okay, from the broader perspective or their materiality perspective, it is not material enough. And that's why they won't call it significantly, systemically important. So again, there can be both arguments to this point. Thank you very much for raising a very important point. We'll take note of it. And we would love to hear and have more comments from you personally, as well as officially from the Bank of Algeria. Thank you very much. We have comment from Brother Badru Jafar from Dubai Islamic Bank, Kenya. Assalamu alaikum. Having read the draft, I'm wondering which industries will inform the benchmark. Example, will mortgages be benchmarked on real estate, working capital for traders on applicable commodities or industries? Thank you very much. We said that there can be a rate based on microeconomic indicators and macroeconomic indicators. The ideal model can be a certain different benchmark rates based on the microeconomic indicators, and those microeconomic indicators include actually include, like for example, the mortgage, the house rent rates, or the capital gain rates on the housing finance, and the commodity prices trends, etc. for the commodity based transactions, the murabha and other transactions, the sale and purchase transactions. So yes, it can be based on microeconomic variables, and it can be based on macroeconomic variables, and we'll come to that discussion in the next few slides, inshallah. Okay. My pleasure. So let's move ahead. Minimum characteristics of a Sharia compliant benchmark rate. In order to be considered Sharia compliant, a benchmark rate shall comply with the Sharia compliance criteria in line with the requirements of paragraph 12 to 31 as the minimum requirements for Sharia principles and rules for this purpose. In addition to the requirements of paragraph 9, a Sharia compliant benchmark rate shall also comply with the suitability criteria in line with the requirements of paragraph 32 to 57 for the purpose of determination of its suitability for generalized mass scale application in the respective jurisdiction. So we are putting the criteria in two parts. The first part of the criteria is where we have where we have the Sharia compliance principles. And the second part of the criteria is where we have suitability. For example, if I take the example of the mortgage rate, so I say that there are two rates. One is rental rate on real estate. So average rate of return in form of rentals on a property in Bahrain is, for example, 6% or 8%. I'm just putting an example. The second aspect is the capital gain on the property in Bahrain maybe is like 2%. I'm just putting hypothetical figures. So for me, for the housing finance, either I can put a combined rate of 8%, that is 6 plus 2, or I can put two different rates, one for the unit pricing for purchase of units of the property, and one rate for the rental. Combined rate is okay, and the capital gain plus rental rate separately are okay. These are the micro variables. The question is this micro variable, which is purely Sharia compliant, suitable for car finance also? Is it suitable for the interbank transaction also? So the point is that this is a good benchmark rate, but this may be applied on a micro basis only. So its suitability criteria has to be assessed at that level. Another example, some of the models are based on opportunity cost, opportunity pricing, capital protection. Now, one of the arguments is that the capital protection rate should be zakah. Now, capital protection rate being zakah is one of the good arguments, that this is the minimum rate that you need to have the capital protection, and then you need to have a growth element to that. So the growth element can be inflation. So, okay, if I say that if I want to apply, so in my country, for example, right now in Bahrain, inflation rate is nearly 10%, for example, and zakah rate is 2.5%. So I make a 12.5% rate. This 12.5% rate might be too high, although it might be reflecting the economic reality, but it might be too high. Is it suitable in Bahrain market to be applied this capital market plus capital protection plus inflation effect on a overall basis? Is it suitable? The suitability for that is second example, but this is a very easily determinable rate. But there can be additional rates which are not that much easily suitably determinable. So for example, if we take real GDP growth rate, which is proposed in some of the models, which we can have it available in some of the good markets, we can have the very, very reliable data on that. But for example, I want to apply that rate in Libya. As of now, Libya wants to fully convert and is in the process of fully converting to Islamic. Rather, it has like by constitution and by regular law, it has to be fully Sharia compliant banking. But if Libya want to apply this rate, considering the earlier civil war type sort of situation, and considering that all data might not be available to have reliable estimates of the real GDP growth rate, so do you think that it is suitable to be applied to Libya? So the question is that first part is having the Sharia compliant rate, which is contained in 12 to 31. And the second part is the suitability criteria, and suitability criteria includes data availability. For example, LIBOR. LIBOR in past has gone through several challenges, including there were times when even the responsibility for determining LIBOR was changed from institution to institution. And the reason was that the LIBOR was based on the survey data of the offered rates from the several bigger banks, and some of the banks played with that. And we are aware, most of us are aware, that there were big penalties on some of the banks for putting incorrect data, which was in their eventual advantage. So considering these things, I would like to mention here that the suitability criteria and Sharia compliant criteria both are to be there applied simultaneously. And while on one hand, the Sharia compliant criteria is a must, but it is also possible that a Sharia compliant benchmark rate does not meet the suitability criteria. So we may not be able to apply that in the given jurisdiction. And that suitability criteria actually addresses some of the aspects that, some of the questions that are raised by some of the experts even today. I will be answering them. So coming to the Sharia compliance criteria. For a first thing is Sharia compliance of base data, underlying transactions or activities. For a benchmark rate to be considered distinctly Sharia compliant, it's vital to ensure that the underlying transactions or activities from which the benchmark rate is derived and determined are Sharia compliant, such that the underlying transactions or activities shall be compliant with Sharia principles and rules and hence free from riba, mesr, or excessive gharar and other Sharia prohibitions. And the underlying transactions are derived from Islamic financial markets. If the underlying transactions are derived from the Islamic financial market, then the structure of such transactions and their combinations as applicable shall be in line with the Sharia principles and rules. Notwithstanding the requirements of paragraph 12, in case of a benchmark rate based on macroeconomic indicators data, it may not be considered necessary to bifurcate the impacts related to the impermissible activities and services at the overall level of jurisdiction's economy. I'm just putting an example that, for example, let's take example of UAE. Okay, UAE, primarily we can say that the economy is based on oil, which is Sharia compliant. It is based on trade, particularly the Dubai side. You can see that a lot of trade activities there. Regional trading hub is there, so that is correct. It has a lot of services, sure, Sharia compliant. But I can have two challenges there within the economics side. First is the financial sector. Not the majority of financial sector is Sharia compliant. So the financial sector's contribution to the GDP or other macroeconomic indicators might not be considered Sharia compliant. Similarly, in some of the hospitality sector, we know that might not be Sharia compliant, and some other impermissible things might be part of the trading activities as well. Considering these factors, the question is, can in a country where we understand majority of the activities are Sharia compliant, routine sales and purchase and all these activities are Sharia compliant, we all know. But yes, there are elements within an economy that are impermissible. What happens in that case? Do you need to segregate the effect of those impermissible activities? So as of now, the standard says that you do not need to bifurcate the impacts related to any impermissible activity, which means that number one, it is very impracticable to do that in most of the countries. Even getting the reasonable data is not enough. Secondly, there is an argument that actually the opportunity cost element that will be calculated from the economic macroeconomic variables will actually be we can say that will be agnostic. So for example, I have $5 and I can invest in an economy where permissible and impermissible both things are there. If I am going to do a transaction, I can do a impermissible transaction or a permissible transaction. So the economic reality is that the opportunity cost from the economic perspective includes the impermissible part as well. So for the purpose of the pricing of the overall products, first is that segregation is not practically possible in most of the countries, and it will not be possible actually. But with regard to the additional element of opportunity cost, or the opportunity element in these macroeconomic indicators, from those perspective, it will not be technically correct to segregate that. So from what we are saying, that in a nutshell, I think I'm answering one of the questions, I think by Dr. Musa Al-Habshi or by somebody else, I'm answering that element, that if our data, our benchmark rate is based on the financial markets, it has to be based on Islamic financial markets or only on the Sharia compliant assets. So for example, if we are taking the sukuk rate as the benchmark rate, average sukuk rate as the benchmark rate, or if we are taking the trend of the rate of return to the investors, again, there can be so many. I'm just giving example. Those have to be based on Sharia compliant transactions only. And I'm going to discuss this thing in detail going forward. But with regard to the second element, that is the economic and macroeconomic indicator element, that has to be considered, including all type of activities. Even for the microeconomic, you might not be able to segregate. So for example, if I have a mall, in the mall, I can rent it to a bank, conventional bank, or I can rent to an Islamic bank, or I can rent to for example, a clothing shop. Now, even the clothing brand may have some impermissible sort of things, some dresses on which there can be argument that this is impermissible or this is permissible. So we have not asked for the economic activity to be bifurcated. But with regard to the financial sector activity, we have talked about bifurcation. Brother Muhammad Abdul Razak has raised hand, I believe. I don't know whether today our time will be taking questions. Can you, brother, put okay? Let us allow a few members on just to allow to speak. I think brother Rizwan, Sister Alia, can you just allow brother Abdul Razak to speak?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, brother. Welcome.
Thank you for organizing this session, and thanks for giving me the time to raise a question directly to you. I'm just to be a bit pragmatic, and I'm quite interested, by the fact that if we were to use macro, I would say, economic indicators versus, whatever we have at the moment, either SOFR or LIBOR, there will be a lag effect, right? Because the LIBOR or the daily SOFR is priced on a daily basis. While if you rely on macroeconomic, indicators such as CPI or GDP and so on and so forth, those data are not available on a daily basis. So meaning that, the Islamic banks, if they use those Sharia compliance benchmark, then, they won't be able to price those, actively, on a daily basis. So you will have, as I said, this lag effect, and sometimes they won't be able to readjust the pricing versus the conventional peers, and they may be completely off market. So i.e., if I would say the yield curve for the Sharia compliance benchmark is 2% above because of this lag effect versus the conventional benchmark, then you will be not competitive or vice versa. So, I mean, for me, whenever we reference, these macroeconomic indicators, I'm kind of like skeptical, but then I do subscribe to the idea that if you were to reference Islamic financial instruments, then eventually, yes, Sukuk or, being traded in the interbank market among the Islamic banks, yes, this can be priced daily. But macroeconomic indicators, I think, because of this lag effect, I don't think it will be feasible for the Islamic banking industry. That's my view. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Abdulrazak. I think you have taken us to a few. I have to take you a few slides ahead and then answer your questions. So I'm taking you to paragraph 17. We'll go back to where we were. We are saying that there are different types of Sharia compliant benchmark rates. So first, this section talks about what can be the Sharia compliant benchmark rates and reflection of economic factors, financial market versus economic reality. So paragraph 17 says Sharia compliant benchmark rates may include in the level of respective priorities. Okay, so first we need to understand that A, B, C, we have priorities. So A is the top priority, B is the second priority, C is the less priority. Sharia compliant benchmark rates may include in the level of respective priorities A, specific benchmark rates based on microeconomic indicators and observable market data to be applied in respect of a specific type of Islamic finance transactions and structures. So the top priority is microeconomic indicators, like I was giving you the example of the benchmark rate for the housing finance. Okay. The second type is B, general benchmark rates based on macroeconomic indicators to be applied generally for all or certain classes of Islamic finance transactions and structures. So these for A and B, again, we are saying that these are the priorities. So A is the first priority, B is the second priority. So the B can be the real GDP growth. It can be, honestly, B has to be the capital protection plus growth opportunity. How you calculate the capital protection and growth opportunity is based on different models. That can be real GDP growth, it can be inflation, it can be zakat plus something, there can be different models for that. But we are saying that this is the second priority. First is impracticable in some of the situations and practicable in some of the situations. B is practicable in most of the developed countries, reasonably developed, because the macroeconomic data mostly is available, but still there can be challenges in countries like Libya. Afghanistan may also have some challenges. Also, they have better situation. One thing I would like to mention, Brother Abdulrazak, that actually the dual banking system will always have these problems. I'll take you to other problems related to arbitrage, etc. as well. Then general benchmark rates based on the financial market data to be applied either for the Islamic financial market transactions in addition to A and or B, or in the absence of the same for all Islamic finance transactions and structures. So what we are saying, Brother Abdulrazak, that if there is a market where you can have A, that is microeconomic indicators, that is great, best. If you can have the macroeconomic indicators, it's good, still you are okay. If you cannot have both of them, or if you have both of them, but still you believe that for the financial market data, for the financial market transactions, which are short term, and even they may include overnight or 1 day or 2 day transactions, for those things, you need to have the general benchmark rate based on the Islamic financial market data. And the financial market data can include the sukuk rate, average sukuk rate. It can include the equity performance rate. It can include the average rates of returns offered to the customers and the trend of that, and with the growth rate. So there can be different parameters for that, or it can be simply not an offered rate, but rather the actual interbank transactions rate. We believe that the most common will be actual interbank transaction rate and a sukuk rate, and a combination of both. That might be probably the best model for coming up with this one. I would like to mention that for these, let me take the examples first. Example of micro level acceptable indicators include growth rate in nominal or value production in individual sectors such as agriculture, manufacturing, construction, and services. expected rate of return estimated through single and multi-factor asset pricing models such as CAPM, FEMA-French model, FEMA-French 5-factor model, etc. Housing price index and rental index for pricing real estate and rental. Using asset allocation methods of depreciation such as unit of production method to amortize principal, and using price returns on the profit part with the profit derived from real economic activity. Weighted average accounting rate of return for corporations such as rate of return on asset, return on equity, return on capital employed, etc. And combination of accounting and financial market information to drive returns such as using Tobin's Q and its variation calculated at firm, industry, or sector level. Now, coming to the macro level economic indicators, we have the examples of growth rate at nominal or real aggregate value of production, such as GDP or GNP, where growth rate and aggregate price index, such as CPI, WPI, consumer price index, that is CPI, wholesale price index, etc., measured with overall basket or without food or energy core inflation, and price returns on index representing overall market portfolios of stock, commodities, and sukuk. These are just examples. We are not putting that which one is suitable for which country. Example for acceptable Islamic financial markets and indicators include weighted average returns on Sharia compliant Islamic financial market transactions, weighted average yield on investment grade sovereign sukuk or price return on sukuk indices, and price return on composite portfolio or weighted average yield of Sharia compliant mutual funds representing returns on stock and or sukuk of government owned enterprises and or investment in sovereign securities. So these are some of the examples, and some of these are actually being addressed with us. Now, addressing your second part of it about the frequency, we have put let me just find that part. Let me answer that part also. Now, in the suitability criteria, we have the frequency of publication of Sharia compliant benchmark rates. It is fundamentally important that a benchmark rate is available and updated at a suitable frequency to ensure that such rate remains relevant and efficient. Such frequency shall be A, in case of an Islamic financial market data-based Sharia compliant benchmark rate, preferably on a daily basis, but in no case more than a weekly basis. And B, in case of an economic indicators-based Sharia compliant benchmark rate, preferably on a weekly basis, but in no case more than a monthly basis. So, Brother Abdulrazak, I think I have answered to some of your questions already, and maybe some of the aspects that you were discussing, maybe we'll be addressing going forward. Thank you very much for being with us. I can see another question in the Q&A tab by Brother Iqbal Hussain from State Bank of Pakistan. It seems that for every type sector of financing like housing, trade, sukuk, consumer, SME financing, there should be a separate benchmark rate. If this is the case, then how many rates may be maintained and monitored by the regulator? I think I have partially answered your question that if you ask me personally, okay, for me, for housing, there should be a separate benchmark rate. For auto finance, I believe there should be a separate benchmark rate. And for general transactions, it should be based on the macroeconomic indicator, that is GDP, real GDP growth, or as I mentioned, like capital protection plus opportunity, whatever model is used for that, and the third rate for the pure interbank transactions, which is more based on the money supply and demand. So, from considering these factors, if you ask me personally, when we talk about, and my starting point for today's discussion was, so for the conventional banking, you can name 100 different products. But if you ask me, there is only one product in the conventional banking, which is money, which is lent on rent, lent on interest. That's it. By whatever name you call the products, the cash flows can be different, the transaction pricing models can be different, all these things can be different. But every conventional banking transaction, if you ask me, there is only one product, and the product is money, not and money is actually what is generating revenue, irrespective of what activity you are doing. On the other hand, in Islamic finance, it's the economic activity that makes it halal, and the money itself has no right of reproduction. So from that perspective, we need to understand that for money, a single rate might be good enough, but for real economic transactions, single rate is not good enough. Again, there can still be a single rate. For example, a country which is in a dual banking system, like the challenge that you may have as State Bank of Pakistan, today you have a dual banking system. So from your perspective, it might be a good starting point to have only one rate. That is the Islamic financial market rate, because Islamic finance market has reached nearly 22, 23%, and you have a very aggressive growth target. Considering the judgment of the Shari'ah court. So considering that, it may be possible that you can try to convert things if you want to convert things in 5 years, you need to start up with at least one model. But let me ask you a question. Consider an ideal situation where there is no interest market. If there is no interest-based market, then actually even the Islamic finance will eventually go towards the economic realities and economic indicators based rates. I can tell you, because that is the only way where you go. I can tell you that today we calculate our opportunity cost because a dual banking system exists, and that system tells us that, okay, my money has an opportunity cost of this much, and it has an opportunity element attached to it that I can lend it on interest. But if I do not have this this luxury available to me, there is no interest-based economy existing, then what is the basis for calculation? So in that situation, even the financial market data alone might not be sufficient, I can tell you. But yes, for the short-term transactions, as I responded to brother Abdurrazzaq, that it is quite possible that we will still be having sort of a combination. So maybe in an ideal scenario, I said that there will be a microeconomic based rate for 2-3 areas, macroeconomic based for general transactions, and one interbank financial market based rate for the interbank transactions and for the central bank even discount window, etc. But if you want to stick to one, the starting point can be, okay, we go only for the Islamic financial market data, or you go only for the macroeconomic based model. In the macroeconomic based model, the only negative thing is that the respective differential between the economic returns and the economic risk and reward in different type of transactions is not implicit in the benchmark rate itself, but still it can be there in the pricing. So for example, for housing, I can add the risk premium to my margin. Benchmark rate can still be there on the macroeconomic indicators. And again, brother, you need to understand that why we are proposing these 3-4 different, 3 different approaches, and within these 3 different approaches, we are allowing multiple models to be there, because this is the reality on which actually the transactions happen in the market. The market transactions actually take into consideration different factors. And from that perspective, we just want to gauge those factors in a uniform term. That is the way we are trying to determine the benchmark rates. However, we keep the option of this model open for this purpose. Thank you very much for your comment. And I believe that we do not, even the regulators can start with only one rate. And obviously, if you are having only one only one sector, that is the Islamic finance sector, and you're not having an interest-based market, then eventually you will feel yourself that you might need more than one rate. Thank you very much, sir. Sheikh Hisham has a question. Could we reach a hedged Islamic finance benchmark rate that have the power to suspect the economic crisis facing all countries nowadays? Sheikh Hisham, let me put an example, a completely different example from the 2008 crisis. I do not have that, maybe somewhere in my presentations, I will have that chart that shows that in the crisis time, the central bank discount, the Fed discount rate was near to zero, very, very low, less than 1. But the LIBOR for US dollar was going 4% above. So the question is, even the LIBOR at that point of time was including a significant credit risk element. This is just one example. Now, they are bringing in SOFR, but the SOFR, SONIA, or the other risk-free rates, they also may have their own limitations. They are backward looking. Okay, they are based on the actual data. That is correct. That is better approach. But the point is the backward looking data may not reflect the future. You can just see what happened to just Silicon Valley Bank. The Silicon Valley Bank, the biggest challenge that we have seen was that, again, I have not analyzed myself the case, but as far as I can see it, it has happened because of long-term assets on fixed rates. So some of these challenges can always be there. We cannot bring one solution for everything. But one thing I can tell you, that the idea of having economic indicators-based benchmark rate makes sure that the transactions of Islamic finance, which are the real economic transactions, which are not actually only money on money transactions, are linked to the real economy. If the economy goes to a crisis, for sure the financial sector will go to a crisis. But I can tell you that if the whole of the economy fails, that will be the only situation where Islamic banking or Islamic finance and these benchmark applications will fail. If the whole economy does not fail, then only the financial sector related demand and supply situations and the financial sector related factors may not fail. Let me tell you an example. Let's take the example of the same Silicon Valley Bank and assume if it was an Islamic bank which had long positions on fixed rates. For me, if my rate of return goes down, I will pass on the impact to the investment account holders. Yes, some of them will start seeing, okay, their rate of return is getting less than the conventional other counterparty banks or maybe other banks in the, even for Islamic perspective, we can consider from the conventional banks, the return is getting low, but it may not be a disaster in one day. So there are some risk absorption tools which are already implicit in the Islamic banking system. So the default may not come in one day. Even the capital requirement may not come in one day. But again, I'm not saying that it is a guarantee that Islamic banks will not fail. No, sorry, nobody can guarantee that. Islamic banks are also businesses. They also have the tendency to fail, particularly if the whole economy is on a downturn. But I believe personally that maybe if we apply the Islamic finance in its true spirit, means that we actually go for the economic transactions. I'm not talking about our just mimicking the conventional transactions in form of certain controversial products we all know. Rather, I'm talking about having the real economic transactions based on the real benchmark rates, which are based on the economic factors, and having a real risk absorption mechanism in form of profit and loss sharing of the investment account holders. I believe that the chances of a failure of Islamic bank are much less. Brother Abdullah Shari'ah, Assalamu alaikum. In a country like, okay, you remove the name, where the regulator is predominantly conventional, whom do you propose should be the alternate standby monitor of the Islamic benchmark rating application? We said that as an option, like for example, the banking association, the Islamic Banking Association can take the responsibility, but again, that has to be subject to the approval of the regulator that we mentioned. So either the regulator has to take the initiative or the Islamic Banking Association together on a collective basis need to do it. Even LIBOR was originally done by the association, not by the regulator. Later it started to be regulated. Now most of the new benchmark rates, risk-free rates, are either coming directly by regulator initiatives, but the original benchmark rates used to come through associations. So an association can take the initiative through, although the support from the regulator is needed, or in some countries where the government's political will is there, the government can take that initiative at the government level. Okay, so let's move ahead. So first part was the Sharia compliance of base data that we have discussed, I think, briefly. I'm not going to again now. Now the discussion is very interesting, I think, and we have a lot of way to go. Again, there is a question in Q&A tab. Okay, they just thank me. You are my pleasure, sir. Okay, so now the second criteria, which for me personally is a very important criteria, and this is where even us as Islamic bankers and some of our scholars need to clear up our mind. Time value of economic resources versus time value of money. This is something that I touched upon in the beginning. The foundations of Islamic finance are based on the replacement of interest rate-based transactions with transactions that are based on trade and commerce. This intrinsically eliminates the time value of money from the transaction that replaces the same with the concept of time value of different economic resources, for example, assets, commodities, services, and entrepreneurship. Time value of in view of the same, a Sharia compliant benchmark rate shall be based on the time value of such resources individually or in the form of a combination of the same. Different benchmarks may be developed for different types of economic resources which are considered preferred, or a combination of rates may be developed based on micro or macroeconomic variables. Sharia compliant benchmark rates need to avoid reference to time value of money. As long as the rate is determined from underlying real economic transactions or activities, it shall be a reflection of the time value of economic resources rather than the pure time value of money. Next aspect is the types of the benchmark rates, which we have discussed already. Okay. I think we need to take a break at 12 also. So I'll try to complete the Sharia compliance criteria first, and then we can take a 10 minutes break for prayers or taking a short rest, and then we'll be joining again. So let me try to complete first the Sharia compliance criteria part. So the types of Sharia, I think till here we have discussed. No, this example we have not discussed here. Examples of Islamic financial market indicators. No, I think we discussed that one also, or not. I think we discussed this one also, unless somebody has a comment. Now, coming to 21, reflecting real risks in the transactions. Okay, there is a question in Q&A tab. There is from anonymous attendee. I request you to kindly put your name also by changing, by renaming yourself. If you right click on your name, you can rename. The option is there in Zoom. Salam. Walaikum assalam. The proposed Sharia compliant benchmark rate includes a general benchmark rate on Islamic financial market data. What would be the basis for pricing of such Islamic financial rate in absence of macro and economic indicators? So the problem is that we believe that in the dual banking system, or where the Islamic banking is still in a smaller size, the easiest solution is this one. But at least it's a solution. At least it is Sharia compliant. The idea is we believe that that the data for this one is easiest available, and it has the less risk of arbitrage. I'll take you to that part, because the arbitrage challenge has to be addressed also, particularly in the dual banking system. So from that perspective, we will be discussing that thing in the arbitrage part. So the main question is, what would be the basis of pricing in financial rate in absence of macro and economic indicators? I think I discussed this part, but let me quickly take you through again. First is weighted average rate of return on Sharia compliant Islamic financial market transactions, weighted average yield on investment grade sovereign sukuk or price return on sukuk indices, price return on composite portfolio or weighted average yield of Sharia compliant mutual funds representing return on stocks and or on sukuk of government owned enterprises and or investments in sovereign securities. So these are the examples where we can actually get this data. This data is comparatively easily achievable. So we believe that even in the absence of economic indicator-based data, this data is available, which can be providing you the easier solution. The risk is, the benefit is the arbitrage risk will be less. I'll discuss that point later, but the disadvantage is that there is a risk that actually this rate may be indirectly linked with the conventional market data. I'll come to that point later. That is part of the suitability criteria. So let me complete the Sharia compliance criteria first, then we'll come to that. Islamic finance transactions are generally based on either of the following: transfer of risks and rewards, for example, murabha and other sales, or absorption of risks and rewards of the relevant assets in case of ijara, commodities, etc., or sharing of risk and reward in case of participatory transactions. Hence, an Islamic finance transaction can never be completely risk-free, and accordingly, any benchmark rate or combination of benchmark rates shall always take into consideration the real risk inherent in the transaction. Notwithstanding the foregoing, at times certain Islamic finance transactions and structure reduce such risk to a significantly low level by applying Sharia-compliant risk mitigation mechanism. For a benchmark rate to be useful to the financial institutions and users at large, it shall be ensured that the distinct Sharia-compliant benchmark needs to be determined while eliminating the relevant risk related to the market activity or being specific to the customers or nature of transaction. So this is, again, we need to reflect the real risk in the transaction, but the specific risk related to the transactions and the specific risk related to the market activity and the customers are to be eliminated. This is something that requires some sort of adjustments to the market data that is obtained. Sharia compliant application methodology, avoiding price uncertainty. This is one of the biggest challenges that we have on the Sharia compliance criteria, that you need to avoid price uncertainty. A Sharia compliant benchmark rate shall be developed in a manner so that its application and or implementation in Islamic finance transaction structures does not cause Sharia non-compliance. For example, through creating gharar, that is excessive uncertainty in the subject matter or determination of pricing of the transaction, or lack of information in this respect in a transaction which is otherwise considered to be in line with Sharia principles and rules. As an example, a backward-looking benchmark rate reflecting historical data only, or a spot rate reflecting current data only, having a methodology of retrospective price adjustments, like so for example, to an already established murabha price or to a ijara rental on retrospective basis in the financial transaction, shall not be considered complied with Sharia principles and rules. Very complicated written paragraph, but unfortunately, this is a complicated issue. Maybe we need to consider rewriting this paragraph again. Sister Alia, please note it down, just making it more simple to understand for people. In a nutshell, what we are saying is that a SOFR type or a normal RFRs, which are backward looking and are applied with a pricing which is adjusted on a retrospective basis, is not Sharia compliant. So the problem is that if we develop a Sharia compliant benchmark rate based on the past data or the current data of the financial transactions, it is not taking into consideration the future aspects, which means that for the pricing methodology for that one, either you take the risk of future, or otherwise you keep it adjustable on future. That is what conventional market did, and what some of our Islamic financial institutions are doing by applying additional methodologies in some of the countries, that they are putting additional transaction structures to adjust through WAD or through execution of additional transactions to adjust the pricing. So the problem is that the pricing adjustment that is happening on a prospective basis on a normal transaction is not on a retrospective basis is not permissible from that perspective. So if we apply a methodology similar to RFR, which are based on the actual market data for last for the overnight rate or for the past periods, that may not be reflecting the future expectations, and hence application of that rate as it is prices is not acceptable. So there can be two approaches. Either you add a margin to that with regard to the future acceptability in the pricing, or the second approach is that the benchmark rate should be adjusted with the forward-looking data. Now, even the RFRs are coming with the forward-looking rate based on the derivative market prices, that how the derivative market is looking at the future adjustments to the RFRs, and that way they are coming with the future forward-looking period rates or the term rates. The problem with the original RFRs is that they are overnight rates. They are not term rates. Having a term rate is actually a challenge, because if we just say, okay, we take the past overnight, again, in Islamic finance, the overnight transactions are less. And if we have overnight transactions and we want to take the overnight transactions only, the point is that may not be reflecting the future. If we take the past 3 months to predict for the next future 3 months, it may still be neglecting some of the economic elements, the change in the economic scenario, etc., that may come in the next few months. So the methodology of application of this shall be in compliance with Sharia. In compliance with Sharia, when we say, we are talking mainly about AAOIFI Sharia standards, which do not allow retrospective adjustments. It allows, for example, for Ijara, it allows that every rental reset date, you can set up it for the future, but you cannot go back and adjust for the past. For the Murabha, it says it is adjusted once, then fixed once, it cannot be adjusted. So these are the things which are actually going to impact some of the methodologies by which it is either being determined or being applied. So from that perspective, it's a very important challenge that the Sharia compliant benchmark rate shall have an application methodology in the pricing which avoids price uncertainty and avoids Sharia non-compliance. Sharia principles and rules require transparency and avoiding uncertainty related to pricing in the contracts. In this regard, it's important that sales and similar transactions are executed at once without deferment, as in the case of conventional forwards and futures. The Sharia compliant benchmark rate needs to avoid excessive gharar in pricing. The price needs to be known at the time of entering into the contract. Sister Alia, can you make a note here? The Sharia compliant benchmark rate application methodology needs to avoid excessive gharar. Okay, the heading says that, but just in the text it is not appearing. That price needs to be known at the time of entering into the contract. The contract shall not be considered valid unless the price is known at the outset to both the contracting parties without any ambiguity. And in transactions on ongoing basis, or those executed in future, or those executed for shorter future periods on an ongoing basis, if the Ijara or participatory or other similar contract need to use a floating rate pricing formula, then the basis of adjustment and details of when and how such changes will affect pricing in rentals or profit ceiling, service charges, etc., need to be clearly agreed upon in the contract. Moreover, the same shall be before commencement of the respective period. So these are actually some of the very important Sharia compliance requirements. The next part, which is related to this one, is forward-looking benchmark rate, periodic rate. I can see a Q&A question in Q&A tab. Sanani Khalil, Bank of Algeria. Is backward-looking benchmarking impermissible in Sharia? No, not at all. Actually, it's perfectly all right to determine. The problem is application methodology. So, for example, I'm doing a Murabha transaction with you today. Last 3 months, average rate in your currency was 3%, for example. So I say my benchmark rate is 3% and my margin, like, you know, the spread is 2%. So I charge you 5%. Now this 5% is fixed for the remaining term. No issue at all. Perfectly all right. The problem is that the way RFRs are applied in the backward-looking approach, in the application methodology, you actually, at the end of the period, you adjust the price in the conventional transaction. In the conventional transaction, the contract says the price will be adjusted based on the actual data of RFR, which means that it is not fixed at the beginning, rather it is adjusted at the end of the period. According to Sharia, in these type of transactions, you cannot change it because of the Sharia requirements and to avoid gharar, etc. On the second type of transaction, that is Ijara, for example, I can set, for example, if my ijara rental is adjusted every 3 months, so I can set up the rate for the first 3 months based on the past data. No problem at all. The problem is, if you ask me that the RFR application methodology requires that you adjust after 3 months for the everyday average balance for the last 3 months. No, then that is something which is generally impermissible as per AAOIFI Shari'ah standards to adjust on a retrospective basis. However, I can adjust the rate for the next 3 months. I cannot change for these 3 months. I can change it for the next 3 months. Right now, our discussion is not about some of the solutions that have been found by some of the institutions. Again, I'm not saying that they all are compliant with the AAOIFI Shari'ah standards. There are challenges in that. But the solution that we want here is that it may be based on the past data, but its application methodology should not be requiring a retrospective adjustment. Now, this is the Sharia part. Now, coming to the suitability part, you will see that, okay, if I apply the past 3 months rate, now the current rate is going up. For example, the past 3 months back, the rate was 2.5, then it became 2.6, then 2.7, 2.8. Now it is 3. Now the trend says that in next 3 months, it can go up to 3.4. But if I take only the past data, then I'm stuck with the average of this rate. So with the average of the rate comes out to 2.7. So the question is whether I apply 2.7 or apply 3.4 or 3.2. This is the issue which needs to be addressed in pricing, because the problem is if you insist the banks that you must apply the past rates only, the problem is that they may have challenges like the Silicon Valley Bank. Again, for the short-term transaction, it will not be an issue. Secondly, the issue will be if you have a Murabah transaction for the long term. That is the challenge where you are stuck in a situation like those banks which are in challenge right now. So from considering these perspectives, we do not have a problem in establishing the rate based on backward looking, but we are afraid that the banking and financial services market will feel that applying only the backward looking rate is not suitable. So that's why we are saying that you have to base your transactions based on the actual data, but you might need to factor in the future elements coming from the economic scenario. Future forward-looking benchmark rate or periodic rate. In case the respective Sharia-compliant benchmark rate is based on past or current transaction data and converted into a periodic forward-looking rate through additional data analysis, for example, through forward transaction data, both sets of data shall comply with the requirement of this standard. In addition, now what will be the first set of data and what will be the second set of data? So the first set of data is the past transactions that have happened, and the second and the current. And the forward-looking, when I convert that past data to a term rate or to a forward-looking rate, I normally what the conventional is doing, that I take the forward transaction data, the derivative market data, and I take that data and I apply that data to build in the margin that needs to be considered for the purpose of forward-looking rate for a 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year period. So from that perspective, we are saying that even the forward data or the derivative data that you need to take should also be Sharia compliant to remain Sharia compliant. So otherwise, it should be economic variable based data, not only the derivative market based data. So again, determination methodology has to be Sharia compliant, and if it is based on a specific type of transactions, then the specific type of transactions shall remain Sharia compliant, as we have mentioned in the first principle. So for applying the same principle, if you are determining a forward-looking rate or a term rate based on 2 sets of data, the past data and the derivative data, the derivative data or the economic variable data should also be Sharia compliant. That is the point. I think there is a comment. Somebody raised the hand.
No.
Okay. I think it was raised for a second and then removed. Okay. So
are we breaking?
Yeah, I think we need to take a break now. But I was just thinking to complete this Sharia compliant benchmark criteria first. I think we are ending that part. I think, no, there are a few paragraphs left. So let's take a break. It is 12:10. Let's take a break for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. 15 minutes maybe. Let's
Okay.
take a break for 15 minutes for prayers, etc. And this is 12:10 at Bahrain time. We will join back, inshallah, at 12:25 Bahrain time, inshallah. See you all at that time. And thanks for staying with us. Brother Rizwan, shall we continue?
I think we should start, inshallah.
Okay. Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome back again. And it's good to see you. So actually, it's a long public hearing, but still, it's good to see that still more than 100 people are there. I think some people disconnected during the break. Hopefully, they will join back. I think there were 125 or 130 participants before we took the break. So I hope some of them will be joining back, inshallah. Now, coming to our topic, we were discussing several aspects of the Sharia compliance criteria. Next aspect of the Sharia compliance criteria is having a Sharia governance framework, that there should be an appropriate Sharia governance framework. As I mentioned, that the project will have three outcomes. One is this standard, second is a governance standard for the administration purposes, and third is the potential models. The models will be included probably within this standard as appendix towards its finalization. However, the governance and administration for Sharia compliant benchmark rates will be a separate standard. The initial work on that standard is already done, but obviously this standard needs to be finalized before that one is finalized. So inshallah, shortly we'll be coming up with that as well. I do not want to go in detail about the Sharia governance framework related requirements. Next requirement, like with regard to this criteria, there is some of the important aspects that some of the situation we have put in on the specifically on the Sharia compliant benchmark rate based on the Islamic financial market data criteria. In line with the requirement of paragraph 17C, a Sharia compliant benchmark rate may be based on the data from Islamic financial markets instead of the economic indicators, if and only if. So the point is that this is conditional. We believe that in the initial phase, it might be more suitable for most of the regulators and jurisdictions, but in the main as a main requirement, it is the less preferred one. So it should be allowed only in the given situations. So the first condition is it is developed and implemented as a secondary benchmark rate in addition to a primary benchmark rate based on economic data to be used in the situations whereby the application of the former may have practical implications. For example, as Brother Abdul Razak mentioned, number of days issue, like, frequency I mentioned, but the frequency issue might be there. So it might not be suitable for the interbank transactions. Secondly, the interbank transactions or the government sukuk or the government discount window, maybe they are at times more relevant on the demand and supply situation for the liquidity within the Islamic finance market rather than the general economic criteria. So for example, even if the general economic criteria is giving you a 3% return, but the government's monetary policy and the economic conditions and the government's own needs actually require I'm just mentioning an example that from some of the aspect that government may be having a higher rate, so that may impact these sort of rates as well. So from that perspective, it might still be needed in addition to the economic criteria. The second is that it is developed and implemented. So it is the condition is with or. So either the A is applicable, which means that you have the economic data based in a benchmark, and you have this one as a secondary benchmark, but used for mainly the interbank transactions, and for other transactions where the economic data based economic macro or microeconomic based indicator based benchmark is not suitable. Or the second situation is where developed and implemented as the sole benchmark rate for the Islamic finance transactions and structure if the development and implementation of a Sharia compliant benchmark rate based on economic data is impracticable due to inherent limitations on account of any or a combination of the following. One, the availability and reliability of economic data, the volatility of economic indicators like hyperinflation situations and others, lack of resources for administering such benchmark rate, and or regulatory restrictions. So considering these factors, it is quite possible that this will be a sole rate, and we believe that in the beginning for some of the markets this one can be the sole rate. There is one question. There is a question from anonymous attendee. Can you please translate all the materials into Russian? We can try to do work on that. To be honest, our Sharia standards are translated into Russian already. Accounting and accounting, our SEPA program is being translated in Russian. Shortly, it will be launched. But the accounting standards and governance standards are not yet translated, and it is actually one of the challenges that we have. So let's put it on our agenda. Inshallah, we'll try to do something. But as of now, obviously, it might not be possible. To be honest, it might not be possible on a priority basis. The only other language in which we will be trying to do, or rather, we are already doing our effort, is the Arabic, which is our second official language. So for Sharia standards, Arabic is the first official language, and the English translation is the official translation, while for all other standards of AAOIFI, English is the official language and the Arabic is the official translation. So Arabic, we will be doing public hearing also, as well as we will be trying to do the translation of the exposure draft immediately, and we'll try to issue it as soon as possible. For Russian, to be honest, it's not easy, but we will be more than happy to collaborate with our partners in Russia and other Russian speaking regions in the Central Asia, where with their help we can try to translate it. So I cannot commit right now, but we'll try our level best to get it done, inshallah. A benchmark rate based on Islamic financial data, market data, shall be acceptable if and only if it fulfills the following condition. The source data for determination of such rate relates only to Sharia compliant transactions taking place in the Islamic financial market. The benchmark rate reflects the role of Islamic financial institutions as a financial intermediary engaged in real economy-based transactions and real assets transactions, investments and services, including transactions amongst themselves. And the benchmark rate reflects primarily the real transactions, is not directly or indirectly linked with the conventional benchmark rates, except for the transition period. Now, the problem is that if I start applying Islamic financial market-based rate today, technically that rate might be today depending on the conventional rate. So the point is that if I do it as it is, it means that I'm creating an indirect linkage with the conventional benchmark rate, and it has happened to some of the earlier experiences as well, which have taken place in different parts of the world on a smaller scale. But I think that has reached the same level. So considering that, I think we are now coming up with this transition period approach, whereby the data reflecting real Islamic finance transactions, which as a matter of necessity are based on conventional benchmark rate, shall not be considered eligible for the purpose of determination of such rate, as it creates an indirect circular reference to the same conventional benchmark rate. However, in the commencement phase, a transition period of up to 3 years may be provided in the computation methodology, during which a phase-out approach will be used to reduce and eventually eliminate the indirect reference to the conventional benchmark rate. So you need to come up with a methodology to eventually make it completely based on Islamic financial market rate. And to be honest, I would like to mention one thing, that while we have arbitrage risk, but this is the reality that Islamic financial market has excess liquidity, and considering that situation, the economic realities may be different. But again, we keep these options open for further research and further development of detailed models. The Islamic financial institution take on a unique role of intermediary, wherein they are engaged in real economic activities, yet they do it in order to provide Sharia compliant financing solutions to the customers under various Sharia compliant products and services. In this regard, it is essential that the pure risk-free rate is not appropriate in reflecting the true nature of risk borne by Islamic financial institution. Hence, there is a need for a balanced approach in reflecting the true nature of risk in Islamic finance products and services. Any alternative distinct Sharia compliant benchmark rate shall be grounded in real economy-based transactions. Sharia compliant benchmark rate shall not be based on conventional derivative market transactions, as I mentioned earlier. However, the market data based on Sharia compliant alternative may be considered acceptable, and the distinct Sharia compliant benchmark rate, while complying with Sharia principles and rules, need to ensure that it reflects a rate of return which is relevant and compatible with the financial market and the level of exposure inherent in the transaction. Suitability criteria. Now we are coming to part two. Part one was the Sharia compliance criteria. Now we are coming to the suitability criteria. We have a comment from Brother Ghulam Shabbir from Central Bank of Pakistan. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Ghulam Shabbir. Wa alaikum assalam. Sir, given that proposed Sharia compliant benchmark rate will be derived through real market rates prevailing in the economy, how it will serve in transmission monetary policy in the economy, which may be forward looking, unlike the parameters of Sharia compliant benchmark rate. Will this not create a delink and a disconnect in the executing monetary policy tools? How far this standard will provide guidance in this regard? I appreciate if you can be kindly enlightened. Thank you very much, Brother Ghulam Shabbir. It's an excellent comment. I think I tried to partially answer it in the beginning. I said one comment of a and one of the Islamic Sharia and economics expert, Dr. Sami Swallam, whom I respect a lot. He made a quote in a conference and he said, in my view, there is nothing wrong in the way the government develops its own discount rates or the monetary policy rates. So the first thing is, the monetary policy rate takes into consideration the economic criteria. So that is the first thing. And obviously, it includes one part as the economic criteria, the economic indicators that are there. And the second part, how the government wants to drive the financial market and how the government want to use the financial market to support the economic activity or to retract the activities or to to control the activities. So again, I'm personally not an economist, but I believe that if you develop a benchmark rate primarily based on the economic indicators, a lot of similarity will be there with the rate that is developed for the monetary policy. However, the point is that the benchmark rate has to be free from conflict of interest. So it has to be more transparent and more fair reflection of the economic indicators. While the monetary policy rate has to take into consideration the government priorities with regard to the direction in which they want to take the policy. Now, there are two different situations. First situation is an ideal Islamic economic system, or even if you are not ideal, at least having a fully Islamic, which means there is no conventional benchmark rates. And the second is where you have an arbitrage situation. In the arbitrage situation where you have a dual banking rate, obviously the monetary policy rate will be reflected in sukuk. The monetary policy rate will be reflected in other indicators that we are talking about. And considering those factors, reality would always be that the rate that we derive as the financial market-based rate will have the monetary policy influence already built in. Now, coming to the second type, where so first type is where we have no other benchmark rate, no conventional benchmark rate. So the monetary policy rate and the economic indicator based rate have some similarities, and the difference is actually coming because of the government's intervention in the rates. Means that the rate is monetary policy rate is with the conflict of interest of the government priorities, while the benchmark rate determined under this model is purely transparent. So obviously, the financial market transactions will be influenced by the monetary policy rate. So the financial market part will be impacted. This is where you do not have a conventional rate. Where you have the conventional rate and Islamic going side by side, I think in the initial years, like monetary policy and these things will not change. Only thing that will change will be how the Islamic financial market rate is determined. And as I mentioned in the last paragraph, that it may have a link to the conventional benchmark rate, and through a circular reference, it might still have a continuous reference with the monetary policy rate, and which may not be eliminated because the sukuk pricing and the Islamic Bank internal pricing, because of the opportunity cost, considering sukuk, considering as opportunity cost. So the interbank pricing will also be linked with that. So eventually the monetary policy rate influence might not be completely eliminated from that. That is my understanding. I'm not personally an economist, but what I understand based on the market mechanism that I feel, that in the real market sector, the way where you have complete Islamic economic based indicators, I think that will be very very likely that both rates will not be different significantly. However, the monetary policy rate will still drive the financial market. While on the current system, where you have a dual banking system, the monetary policy rate will eventually continue to drive, because it will be driving the sukuk rate and others. I believe, Brother Ghulam Shabir, I am able to answer you, and I think there is something. These are the things that we actually need to learn from the central bankers, because that is not our forte. Brother Muhammad Naveed Yusufi, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. Thank you for great presentation. Although it's not relevant to this session, however, I was keen to know if there are any steps taken for accounting capital reserve for climate-related financial risks. On the governance side, we are working on the sustainability standard, which is being revised. But I think that capital reserve for climate-related financial risk is primarily as my understanding, it's primarily domain of IFSB, not domain of AAOIFI. We will keep it into consideration as a comment in our sustainability standard on which we are already working. We can consider this aspect. It's a good comment. We take a note of it, sir, and we try to consider it in our standard. But I believe that the capital reserve part will actually be a regulatory matter, and considering a regulatory and prudential matter, it is domain of IFSB, not AAOIFI. But even from our perspective, as we are already working on the standard, we will take this comment. Sister Alia, please make a note of it and forward it to the relevant working group when we discuss the standard there, inshallah. Thank you very much for your kind comment. So now we have come up to the suitability criteria. Okay. Brother Ghulam Shabir has another comment. Many thanks for your detailed explanation. If I understood your guidance correctly, that means that dual banking system sovereign sukuk may continue to have the same pricing as conventional monetary policy tools unless an economy fully embraces with Islamic finance. I think in a nutshell, you summarized what I said. Maybe my wording was quite confusing for a lot of people, but I think you summarized it very better. That in a dual banking system, till the time that continues, sovereign sukuk may continue to have the same pricing as conventional monetary pricing tools unless an economy fully embraces with Islamic finance. I think you perfectly summarized what I said. Thank you very much. Now we are coming to the suitability criteria, and since we are running short of time, and unfortunately in most public hearings we run short of time. On one hand, it is you feel bad that you are unable to cover it fully, but at the same time you feel happy because of this interaction, lot of comments that you receive, because the purpose of the public hearing is not just to make a presentation, rather the real purpose is to get interaction, and we are so much thankful to all of you for making contributions in this today's discussions. What I will do now, that I will not take any question now till for next 5-7 minutes. In next 5-7 minutes or up to 10 minutes, I'll quickly explain the suitability criteria. I'll take you through quickly. I'll not read it word by word, but obviously the standard is in front of you. You all have the access to the PDF copy of the standard, and will encourage receiving comments in writing as well. I can see one question in Q&A tab, but I will prefer that I quickly take you through the suitability criteria and then we come back to this discussion. So for the suitability criteria, the first element is compliance with the requirements of global best practices, IOSCO, FCA, BMR. Actually, there are good regulations available. Actually, we have just created a reference. Probably our second standard, as I referred to, will have more elements combined with that. But the compliance with global best practices is a must to have the Sharia, to have a Sharia compliant benchmark rate. So it is the first criteria from the suitability perspective. So this has to meet the top global perspective. From the even from the conventional perspective, global criteria needs to be met, because we have to show that we have the minimum benchmark quality up to their standards as well. Practicality, serving market needs and expectation. This is very important point. So it should avoid, for example, high volatility. It should reflect relevant risks, and it should have the ability to reflect changes in the market in the short term as well. Frequency of publication, this is one of the aspects that we discussed already in response to, I think, question from Brother Abdul Razak. So let me quickly say, repeat it again, that for the financial market-based criteria, the frequency has to be daily, preferably, but in no case more than a weekly. And in case of economic indicators-based criteria, it has to be weekly, preferably, but in no case more than monthly. Again, you cannot have the full GDP estimate on a weekly basis. Actually, the methodology and the mechanism, even if it is based on GDP or inflation or other factors, it has to see the base numbers, and then it has to be updated based on a given methodology for a periodic basis. One of the models that we have got has indicators which are based on survey as well. So there are different possible models in which you can have the frequency improve by having surveys and other. Only the update numbers approach can be followed to update the periodic rates, which will be obviously readjusted whenever the new rates are available. Frequency of publication of Sharia compliant, this one we discussed. So again, I'm not going in detail. Arbitrage risk management, one of the most important suitability criteria, and actually one of the biggest challenge and rather biggest criticism that we are having on this concept of Sharia compliant benchmark rate is the arbitrage. The problem is the dual banking system. The arbitrage risk is coming because of dual banking system, because of conventional being allowed. Considering our teachings from our religion, from our Sharia, conventional should not be there. The issue is not that Islamic benchmark should not be there. Our challenge is that the conventional banking should not be there. So anyway, it's not to wage a war. Like, again, having interest is a waging a war against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. So from that perspective, even if you wage a war against conventional banking, war in the not in the terms of guns and pistols, but rather in terms of proper efforts to eliminate the conventional banking from the Muslim societies and Muslim countries' economies. Again, I do not want to go in that argument further, but the point is simple. This challenge is coming because of dual banking system. If the dual banking system is not there, this risk is not there. But we are afraid that because of the dual banking system, this risk becomes a huge risk. So for example, if I put my benchmark rates based on inflation and the conventional benchmark rates are based on money supply, so it is quite possible that in a country where money supply is abundant, but at the same time inflation is going up, the Islamic benchmark rate is at 10% and the conventional benchmark rate is at 6%. So this is quite possible that conventional players will start playing with their money by putting it into Islamic instruments. And thanks to some of the controversial products, a lot of arbitrage activities are possible. AAOIFI Sharia standard does not allow the tawarruk transaction to be used to place money with the conventional, but somehow this is happening. So these are the things where the controversial products may have challenges increasing this arbitrage also, because if you eliminate the controversial transactions, even the arbitrage risk becomes much minimal. But again, we are at a challenge, and we have this challenge till the time the dual banking system is there and the conventional is the predominant one. So from that perspective, to be honest, this risk is there. In order to meet this risk, let me read it out. One of the biggest challenges for regulators in order to implement a separate Sharia compliant benchmark in addition to our already prevalent conventional benchmarks rate is the risk of arbitrage by the market participants who may transact in both Sharia compliant and conventional regimes. If different benchmarks are used with significant differences in pricing risk across financing contracts, then there may arise a risk of arbitrage opportunities by swapping assets or liabilities. This risk is expected to be mitigated significantly by the transaction cost, front-end and back-end loads, and certain measures that may be taken by the regulators in case the two benchmark rates are not significantly different. Sister Alia, please just make a note of it. I think we need to discuss about the controversial transactions here as well. Risk, however, in case of such rates being significantly different, the risk of arbitrage increases. Accordingly, the design of the Sharia compliant benchmark rate needs to incorporate necessary measures to avoid creating arbitrage opportunities. Then we have jurisdiction and regional specificity. Now we actually, for the suitability, one of the challenges that we saw that, for example, the refinitive rate was not jurisdiction specific or region specific. So there were some challenges with regard to the timing and with regard to the rate and with regard to the money supply in different markets and the interbank transaction rate. So actually that model never worked properly. So this is one of the learnings that we have, that the benchmark should be region and jurisdiction specific and currency specific as well. However, it can be jurisdiction and region, which means that, for example, if you have maybe, for example, you can have a single rate for the Central African Union or the Union of the Central Bank of Western African countries, etc. So if you have, or maybe it is possible for GCC also. Again, it might not be as easy, but because there is no single central bank or central body, but still there are possibilities for having regional, because the other economic factors are similar. But other than that, generally we are talking about regional and jurisdiction specificity as well as the currency specificity. So it has to be based on single currency, and the currency adjustments are to be made with regard to the rate if they're to be applied in different currencies. Tolerable volatility, one of the biggest challenges is tolerable volatility. That, for example, in case of inflation, like for example, in case of GDP based data and indicators and others, maybe the risk of the change might not be that much volatile, but with regard to the inflation, it might be more volatile. And there are some other financial market, some other economic indicators that may be even more volatile. So there has to be general approach towards managing volatility and defining the tolerable limits and removing the off-limit data, etc., and keeping a combination model rather than a single model, progressive step-by-step approach for changing over and above the tolerable limit. So there can be different approaches that need to be applied to meet the criteria. Transparency of inputs. Again, this the issue will be discussed more in detail with regard in the governance standard that we have referred to. But the core principle is there that the inputs have to be transparent. Preferably, they should be direct data based or through collecting agent or through additional source. But there is a priority that we have defined, that there should be a priority of inputs with regard to the transparency of inputs to make sure that these are not played with, particularly by the bigger players. So there are two types of inputs. There can be contributed data and there can be direct data. In both type of the contributed data and the direct data approaches, we have put some core principles to ensure transparency. Transparency and disclosure has to be there in regard to the design and methodology also. So the design and methodology should be all transparent, and the maximum, sort of transparency need to be maintained in that, and the protocols and the controls have to be there. Publishing perspective, transparency has to be applied in the publishing perspective as well. The core principles are here. Some more details, as I mentioned, might be included in the second standard, as I mentioned. Transparency and objectivity in administration is very important. The administration process and the administrator have to be very much objective, transparent, avoiding any sort of conflict of interest. And that's why banking associations are not the first choice, regulator is the first choice, or the government level intervention is the first choice to establish these benchmark rates. Governance framework we talked about already. So governance framework is important. Design of the benchmark rate has additional suitability aspect. For example, the sample, for example, the adequacy of the sample used to represent the market activity size and liquidity of the relevant market, the relative size of underlying market in relation to volume of trading in the market, the distribution of trading among market participants, etc. Relevance of the benchmark to reflect changes to assets underpinning a benchmark, etc. Data sufficiency and stable dissemination. Data has to be sufficient and its dissemination must be stable. So it has to be based that are formed on the competitive forces of demand and supply, and to provide it must ensure confidence and the sufficiency of data, and its stability in terms of dissemination is very important. Acceptance and hierarchical prioritization of data and application of judgment. So with regard to the different type of data, like input-based data and the direct data, we have put some hierarchy with regard to the reliability on that in this section. Again, as time is not permitting me, I will not go in detail, but some of these things have to be like, number one, controlled, and number two, disclosed and kept transparent. With that, we are thinking of targeting it by 2026. It's a long way to go. Still, after this one, we have to go through the models which we have started evaluating on a qualitative basis, but the quantitative analysis may take more time. We may need to come up with the software engines. We need to work with the regulators to come up with actual transaction, actual data-based model and its simulations. So a lot of work has to happen. The governance standard needs to be done. Hopefully, we'll be doing maybe some roundtables in addition to the public hearings as well with regard to some of the specific issues and with regard to the selected models, inshallah. So we look forward towards more contribution from your side. As the time is just ending, I just have two comments which will be, which let me address quickly. Number one, from Tuğba Demirtaş from Central Bank of Turkey. Thank you for your valuable clarification. Do you think it's possible or rational to improve a Sharia compliant benchmark rate that will be used internationally for all the transactions like LIBOR, of course, without riba? For many benchmark rates may also result in more arbitrage risk and negatively affect trust in the Islamic transaction. Sir, thank you very much. It's a very good point. I don't have a disagreement, but the point was that when we mentioned about jurisdiction specific and the regional specific, the idea was that the data that has to be like, it is quite possible that the financial markets across the globe may have more interaction and more arbitrage risk, but the economic realities across the globe might not be in the same manner. So, for example, let me just mention, for example, let's take example of Turkey. It appears to be hyperinflation and high inflation, but general other economic trends may not be that bad. Now, if you consider it as one of the indicators, like one of the country which applies one single Islamic IBOR, your economic realities may not be matching with the economic realities of Bahrain, where the US dollar is the BD, Bahraini dinar, is pegged with the US dollar. So the result is that as of now, if we try to club together the transactions between these two countries and try to come up with a single rate, it might be a biggest challenge. So rather, we believe that one of the examples is, another example is that when Refinitiv, that is Thomson Reuters, earlier Thomson Reuters, now Refinitiv, which is part of LSE Group, they did the Islamic benchmark rate. It did not work very well, and one of the reasons was there were timing differences between the transactions. So even the transaction reporting timing difference may impact some of the things. For example, the Malaysian market starts early in the day from perspective of Bahrain or Turkey or European countries or Central Asia. So actually, the timing differences, the currency differences, the economic reality differences in different countries may be having a problem. So now let's think of this model that you are talking about. I can think of that individual models based on the economic indicators and the financial markets are needed, but it is quite possible to come up with a global Islamic financial market rate. So, for example, we know that there are some cross-border transactions, like Malaysia gets a lot of cross-border transactions. Actually, a lot of Islamic cross-border transactions take place in the UK. UAE is also a center for that. A lot of a lot of sukuk, etc., are actually from different parts of the world are actually launched in UAE or in Malaysia. So there are different options that we can think of whereby we can consider a global Islamic finance market for the cross-border transactions. And for that market itself, it is possible to come up with a benchmark rate that applies to that market. And obviously there are countries like, for example, if you are a financial institution in Pakistan, you cannot place it outside of Pakistan, not allowed by the regulators. So there are a lot of countries where these sort of restrictions are also there. So a uniform benchmark rate may be useful for the global Islamic finance market where open cross-border transactions are happening, but it may not be suitable as a single rate across the globe. So from that perspective, even LIBOR, if you see, LIBOR worked because there were three main centers, and you know that it worked in different currencies, in different and the US dollar LIBOR was primarily based on the US data, New York market, and sterling and euro were based on the European markets and the UK market. So somehow you can think of coming up with a global market rate which can be applied on the global transaction, any sukuk that is going globally, or any other cross-border transactions, you can apply that rate, but that rate should not replace the rate that we are talking about for the individual jurisdictions. So, but thank you very much for a very good comment. I think, Sister Alia, we need to keep it in mind, and we may need to consider this comment for the working group. Working group may consider that if they want to add something to coming up with a global rate for the cross-border transaction as well. Brother Ghulam Shabir, highly appreciate AAOIFI for this great initiative. Will be a great service to Islamic finance industry. However, I think execution of this benchmark will require extensive consumer literacy on this benchmark, besides requiring Islamic banks to perhaps remodel and further strengthen their risk management environment. Just an ordinary comment. No, Brother Ghulam Shabir, I think it's an excellent comment. I fully agree. It is a quantum leap, what they say, quantum leap. If we actually do it, if we are actually able to do it, it will be a quantum leap. And I would like to mention particularly that we are willing to work with all the regulators, but considering that the Federal Shari'ah Court in Pakistan has ruled for a prohibition of riba, and the central bank is taking some actions, I believe Pakistan should be one of the more important countries with more stable data availability with regard to testing of this one. So we need to work, we need to talk to Central Bank of Pakistan in detail for that. Obviously, we have talked to one or two other central banks as well, and inshallah we'll be approaching certain other central banks. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, the central banks who are present here, we would request all of them to be part of this initiative. We need your support in this initiative at all levels, from the technical input level to the testing of data level. For that, I would like to thank you again for being here. And I would like to thank all the participants being here for this great interaction. The time is over by 5 minutes, so I think we need to conclude. There will be more public hearings on this one in English as well as in Arabic, inshallah, and there will be roundtables when we are able to actually select the models and fine tune them. Inshallah, there will be roundtable on those models as well. Thank you very much. With that, I would like to take your permission, and Brother Rizwan, shall we conclude now?
Yes, thank you very much. I think you've already concluded it yourselves, but thank you very much for delivering a very interactive public hearing session. On behalf of AAOIFI and its partners for this public hearing, Arab Monetary Fund, Bahrain Association of Banks, as well as UAE Banks Federation, and with the active support of Central Bank of Bahrain, we would like to thank you for joining us for this important session. public hearing session. As Brother Umar mentioned, this is the first public hearing on this standard. There will be at least 3 to 4 other public hearings, and at least one of them will be in Arabic. And we highly encourage you to please attend them. Hopefully through this presentation, through one of these public hearings, we will be able to present to you some models that we talked about earlier that will be presented in this standard, inshallah. So stay tuned to our social media pages, as well as our emails, notifications. If you have not already signed up for our YouTube channel, please do so, because all these public hearing sessions will be made live, or will remain available on our YouTube channel. And please feel free to refer to them for your reference, and watch them later on as well. If you do have any comments, as we said, please share them on governance@AAOIFI.com. For any general comments or any areas of collaboration or any ideas for collaboration, please reach out to us on info@AAOIFI.com, or you can reach out to me at rmalik@AAOIFI.com. We'll be very keen to explore areas of collaboration, inshallah. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the Secretariat, who has worked really hard in putting together this important exposure draft. And this is not the only exposure draft we're working on. Of course, there are a number of other standards that we are working on for our under our governance board, AAOIFI Governance and Ethics Board, under our AAOIFI Accounting Board, as well as AAOIFI Shari'ah Board. We have 2 other public hearings later in the month. So one on the 27th, focusing on auditing standard and the framework, and on the 27th is the financial accounting standards related public hearing. And the second one, the 28th, is related to the auditing. We would highly encourage you to attend those as well, and benefit from the discussions. We would really, we'd love to benefit from your knowledge and experience in these sessions as well. So, on behalf of the AAOIFI Secretariat, I would like to thank you all for joining us once again. And, inshallah, we do hope that you have a blessed Ramadan. May Allah bless us with the opportunity to benefit from this Ramadan, inshallah. And may Allah accept all our siyams and qiyams. And inshallah, we look forward to welcoming you again to AAOIFI event, inshallah, next week. So with that, I take your permission. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.